Thank you. Matthew, Ludovica, Ian, everybody who made this possible. And thank you all for coming. And Eileen Miles for that amazing, those words. That was great. Today's International Happiness Day, we were told, at the Emma Kunst Grotto. Have you ever been there? It's great, isn't it? It's so amazing. I want to move in. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about my praxis and why I do what I do before I get into what I'm doing currently. So I am 51 now, but when I was a child, I grew up in a rural part of Pennsylvania, in a very small rural impoverished factory town about 2 hours outside of Philadelphia. And my family all worked in the factory. I come from factory workers. And I didn't like what the factory did to my family. I wanted to be a poet, and there was no room for that where I grew up. When I say I don't like what the factory does to people, I love that sound. It keeps happening every 10 minutes, so you're going to enjoy it with me, maybe. Isn't that nice? When I was a child, my grandmother had a shelf in her living room with artwork by all 9 of her daughters and sons, little pieces of artwork, paintings, etc. But nothing after the age of 5, and I asked her, I said, well, where's the work they're doing now? This is just like their earlier period of work or whatever. And she was very angry that I would even ask. She said, they don't have time for art. They're working. So I realized that I needed to leave. And I did. I ran away as a teenager to Philadelphia. And I felt very good about that decision. It was fantastic for me. And I was doing exactly what I wanted to do. And I had an enormous peer group of artists of all kinds. The sad thing is that by the time we were all in our mid to late 20s, half of everybody had already stopped doing their artwork. By the time I was in my 30s, I was virtually alone, and now at 51, it's hard to find anybody my age who's still doing their work. It's just, the culture is designed to destroy us. But I felt very good about this decision, and I was very prolific. I didn't have a problem with being able to write. This is the mid-1980s when I moved there, so jump ahead a couple of decades to 2005. I go back out to where I grew up for a family reunion, and on the train ride home, I realized that I had turned everything I was doing into a factory. The way I was writing, the way I was tabulating things in folders. And I could see it on my desk as soon as I got home. It was devastating. And I didn't write for about a month. I willed myself to not write. I did cheat and take notes in case I decided that I could write again. But I needed to get the factory out of me one way or the other. I was naive in thinking that geographical relocation was all I needed to do to get rid of the factory, but it followed you. It will follow you if you're raised by these people. So about 3.5 weeks into this crisis, it was terrible not writing. It was absolutely horrible to me. I started making a list of the problems with the factory, what the factory does to you, spiritually, mentally, physically. There were sub-lists that manifolded back into the original. Then after I'd exhausted this, I saw at the top of that list I'd written the phrase, the inability to be present. And I realized that that was what terrified me the most about my family. They're never there when they're there. They use the word hope continuously. It's hard to live without the word hope, but if you use it too much, it's poison. Because it means that you've given up on the present entirely. Hope is a fiction, right? It's a fantasy. It doesn't really exist. You're hoping for something that will happen. So that is the morning when I decided to create something of extreme present, since my biggest problem was that my family is never present. So that's when I created these rituals that I call somatic poetry. The first 7 that I did, I wrote a single color of food for a day for 7 days. And I would wear the color. The red poem was the first. I went through the spectrum. And I found a red wig in a dumpster from a beauty academy near where I lived. And it was half of the wig was permed and curly and the other half was straight. And I realized that when I would wear this wig around and eat red food, that it altered the way the language was coming out of me. And the language was coming out of me onto my notebook in ways that it would have never come otherwise. I was hooked. I realized that this worked. And I've done hundreds of these since. I stopped cutting my hair a year later, in 2006, on the 3rd anniversary of the invasion of Baghdad, because many of my friends and I were involved in the anti-war movement, and of course to no avail, where the wars were just getting worse. But I also didn't want to be yet another American citizen who was forgetting that we were at war. At this point, we were killing about 3 children a day in Afghanistan. So I love this, and I started doing these rituals. I want to read a couple of samples to you. So one of the things is, my mother was in trouble with the law quite a bit when I was a child. She was being arrested and jailed, and then couldn't get work because in the United States they love to humiliate people who are in trouble with the law in the newspaper. And then your life is sort of finished. So she put me to work from 8 to 16. I was selling flowers along the highway. And this is the 1970s. So from 1974 until 8 years later, I was doing this horrible job in the middle of nowhere. There were no electronic gadgets. There were no cell phones. There was nothing like that to distract me, so I became a reader. And in the next year, 1975, when I was 9, I discovered Emily Dickinson, and I fell in love with poetry. And I've been in love with poetry ever since. Emily Dickinson is just, I love her so much, and she was like a secret friend. So I wanted to do a ritual about Emily Dickinson, and I went back to her home in Amherst, Massachusetts. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the ritual that I did, because I published the rituals with the poems, and then I'll read the resulting poem. Okay? Maybe before that, though, I will read I have a bit of a manifesto about somatics. It's called the Right to Manifest Manifesto. I cannot stress enough how much this mechanistic world, as it becomes more and more efficient, resulting in ever-increasing brutality, has required me to find my body, to find my planet, in order to find my poetry. If I am an extension of this world, then I am an extension of garbage, shit, pesticides, bombed and smoldering cities, microchips, cyber, astral, and biological pollution, but also the beauty of a patch of unspoiled sand, all that croaks from the mud, talons on the cliff that take rock and silt so seriously, flying over the spectacle for a closer examination, are nothing short of necessary. The most idle-looking pebble will suddenly match any hunger, any rage, suddenly, and will be realized at no other speed than suddenly. Oh, I'm not finished with this book, sorry. So the designer did this. His name is Jeff Clark. My publisher is Wave Books, and so the rituals are on black paper, and then the resulting poems are on white, which is very nice. So this is the Emily Dickinson ritual, my love and my homage to Emily Dickinson. And I title it Anoint Thyself, for John Coletti and Jess Mines. Visit the home of a deceased poet you admire and bring some natural thing back with you. I went to Emily Dickinson's house the day after a reading event with my friend Susie Timmons. I scraped dirt from the foot of huge trees in the backyard into a little pot. We then drove into the woods where we found miniature pears, apples, and cherries to eat. I meditated in the arms of an oak tree with the pot of Emily's dirt, waking to the flutter of a red cardinal on a branch a foot or so from my face, staring, showing me his little tongue. When I returned to Philadelphia, I didn't shower for 3 days. then rubbed Emily's dirt all over my body, kneaded her rich Massachusetts soil deeply into my flesh, then put on my clothes and went out into the world. Every once in a while I stuck my nose inside the neck of my shirt to inhale her delicious, sweet earth covering me. I felt re-virginized through the ceremony of my senses. I could feel her power tell me these are the ways to walk and speak and shift each glance and the total concentration for maximum usage of our little allotment of time on a planet. Lose and waste no more time, poet. Lose and waste no more time, she said to me, as I took note after note on the world around me for the poem. And the poem is titled, Emily Dickinson Came to Earth, and Then She Left. Your sweaty party dress and my sweaty party dress lasted a few minutes until the tomato was gone. Someday they will disambiguate you, but not while I'm around. Our species won, Emily. We won. It feels so good to be winning. The flame of victory passes around and never goes out. Dinosaurs ruled Massachusetts. Dinosaurs fucking and laying eggs in Amherst, Boston, Mount Holyoke. Then you appeared, High Priestess, pulling it out of the goddamn garden with both hands. You, Emily, remember the first time comprehending a struck match can spread a flame. It feels good to win this fair and square. Protest my assessment all you want, but not needing to dream is like not needing to see the world awaken to itself. Indestructible epiphanies consume the path. And just because you're having fun doesn't mean you're not going to die. Recrimination is the fruit to defy with unexpected appetite. I will be your outsider if that's how you need me. Electric company's stupid, threatening letters cannot affect a poet who has faced death. So this is my book, A Beautiful Marsupial Afternoon, that has many of the first rituals I did. And then I want to read a piece from the second book of rituals called Ego Deviance. And I will read the opening piece as well from this book. So this is a piece that I wrote. This ritual that I did was in celebration of my 30th anniversary of inventing the gender-neutral name CAConrad. I was born in Topeka, Kansas, and you're forbidden by law to change your name, so I wasn't allowed to change my name. Do what I wanted to, but I use it anyway. I don't care what they think. So this is a ritual that I title MIA Escalator. I'm a big fan of escalators. I like to use them for writing poems especially. And I will read that and then the resulting poem. MIA Escalator for Jen Benka and Carol Mirakov. I rode several of my favorite escalators in Philadelphia, taking notes up and down the vantages. At the top and bottom of the ride, I would show photographs of myself to strangers and ask, "Excuse me, have you seen this person?" Sometimes there was confusion. "Isn't that you?" I would reply, "No. Many people think I look like her, but have you seen her? I feel very fortunate to have been born before the ultrasound machine. My generation was the last generation to have a male and female name waiting at the other end of the birth canal. My generation is the last to have our mothers touch their bellies, talking to us as male and female, pink or blue, both pink and blue. Have you seen this person?" I enjoyed my conversations with strangers and made at least one new friend, a handsome man who knew I was the person in the photograph. That person, I am that person, and agreed. The ultrasound machine gives the parents the ability to talk to the unborn by their gender, taking the intersex 9-month conversation away from the child. The opportunities limit us in our new world. Encourage parents to not know. Encourage parents to allow anticipation on either end. Escalators are a nice ride, slowly rising and falling, riding while riding. Notes for the poem, meeting new people either end. Excuse me, my escalator notes became a poem. Bless you. The poem is titled, I Hope I'm Loud When I'm Dead. It's a good bet I will be. I have a mannequin for a paperweight. It is difficult to type with such a large paperweight. I reach around lovers late into night typing. From behind, it is impossible to tell which is Virgil. Poetry can be of use. The field of flying bullets the hand reaches through, loving the aftertaste, finding a deeper third taste. Many are haunted by human cruelty through the centuries. I am haunted by our actions since breakfast. You said too much poetry. I said too much war. The biggest mistake for love is straining. There's a door marked mistake we entered. You said too much fooling around. I said fuck off and die. I like to talk about the importance of being creative at this point because while I didn't have a problem writing, that isn't why I started doing these rituals. I find when I give workshops, I've been doing workshops on these for quite a while all around the world, and there are always people in the audience who say, there are two things. One is people are blocked, and then these rituals help them back to the forces within. There's a lot of research on the human brain that I love to point to about that, which we could talk about later if you want. But the other thing is, I meet a lot of people, especially young people, who say, maybe I'm wasting my time in art school. I was just teaching not long ago at the Sandberg Art Institute in Amsterdam, and there were several students saying this, and I said, absolutely not. It's vital to be creative right now. And I want to tell you about this gentleman. This is Robert Desnos. Robert Desnos was an early 20th century French surrealist poet. Most people know the bully of the group, André Breton, because bullies are remembered more. But Breton was interesting, but not nearly as talented as Desnos. Desnos was extraordinary. But the story I want to tell you is about what happened to Desnos during the war. When the Nazis appeared on the border of Paris, he joined the French resistance. And he wasn't exactly built for a resistance movement, not the healthiest people, rather sickly, but he did it anyway because you needed to do it. And he was eventually captured by the Nazis and sent to Auschwitz. This story has everything to do with being a poet, being a creative person, meaning a person who is extremely observant of the world around them all the time. Desnos noticed when he arrived in Auschwitz what the guards were doing to protect themselves from what they were doing to the prisoners. Desnos, of course, was looking at the guards as human beings, regardless of whether the guards were looking at him as a human being or not. Desnos was writing a book of poems as a prisoner in Auschwitz. Can you imagine doing your art in Auschwitz as a prisoner? It sounds almost unthinkable to be able to do that. But that's just how dedicated he was. And the Nazis were not handing out notebooks and pens. He was using fingernail clippings, writing the shit and dirt on scraps. This pays off because one day the guards arrive with a flatbed truck. And they load Desnos and the other prisoners in the barracks onto this truck, and they start to drive across the camp. And Desnos understands that they're on their way to the gas chamber, and everybody will be dead in about 30 minutes. Desnos and the Surrealists, the Surrealists were heavily involved with the occult. He was their palm reader. He forces himself to the back of the truck to get off first. As the other prisoners are getting off, he's grabbing their hands and reading their palms in German, very loud so the guards can hear and understand, and focusing on the lifeline. You, madam, have a very long lifeline. You're going to have grandchildren and retire. Your life's going to be wonderful. Just on and on and on. And it works. The guards are confused, and then they're irritated and angry, and then they become despondent and very sad, and they cannot kill these people, and they load all of them back up onto the truck and send them back to the barracks. And about a month later, when the Allied forces free the camp, we've been hearing these stories for decades from the survivors of how the poet Robert Desnos figured out how to save everybody's life that day without a single bullet. That's the reason why we all need to remember how essential creativity is. I went to Occupy Wall Street 6 different times. Almost everybody I met at Occupy Wall Street was an art student, a creative writing student. Creativity, and I was so excited, I felt like I was waiting my entire life to see this. Completely horizontal political system that they had built. 0 leaders. Everybody was a leader. It took forever to make decisions, but they made them together. Every time the police blocked them, removed their bullhorns and their amplified sound systems, they created the human microphone, etc., etc. They just kept going. It was amazing. I like to talk about this because I feel like it's more important than ever that everybody keeps their creative skills sharpened. They can come in. This is called the Aerial Sky Ranger. In 2015, all the paperwork was signed in the United States that the state of Michigan became the first state of the 50 states to have carte blanche drone surveillance. If you are in the state of Michigan, these aerial sky rangers can be watching you from any distance at any time, and it's completely legal. I was in Montreal recently on a panel discussion group, and of course, if you know, I don't know if you know your geography, it doesn't really matter, but I'll tell you, Michigan shares a border with Canada, so some of these Canadians were very upset about this. And while I am very upset about surveillance, that is nothing compared to the drones we're using in the 7 nations my nation is currently bombing: Somalia, Syria, Pakistan, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, Libya. We've been doing this for years. In Pakistan alone, we've killed over 1,000 civilians. Over 200 of those civilians were under the age of 5. We've been killing these people for a very long time now. So I do a lot of rituals. I just read a couple of samples. I did a ritual at Machine Project Gallery in Los Angeles. I actually came up with the idea when I was in Marfa, Texas on a fellowship, but knew that I couldn't do this ritual there because it involved a lot of screaming and people would call the police. But in Los Angeles, it's very apathetic, and you can scream and nobody cares if you even die on the street. So I thought, well, good, I'll wait till I'm in Los Angeles. So what I did was I was thinking about the word drone the way a poet would think about the word. Poets are unlike prose writers. Novelists, nothing against novelists, but they look at words as how to construct sentences and get a story across. Poets are more interested in the sonic delivery and absorption of sound. Human beings are about 75% water. Nothing on this planet absorbs sound quite like water and holds it in the molecules of the water in our bodies. So I was thinking about that when thinking about how the word drone enters the conversation in the American media, in the mainstream. The Pentagon spends millions of dollars on their think tanks on how to build the propaganda around these war machines. I'm fascinated by the fact that the word drone, well, I'll tell you what I did. I was suspicious of this, and I tried this ritual, and it was odd that it worked. I had a list of words that I was chanting, like spaghetti, octopus. I had a whole group of words where the consonants and vowels were constantly different and changing at the beginning and the end of the syllables. Then I chose, so I've got my old copy of the Bhagavad Gita, and I found my earmarked page where they talked about Om, O-M. In India, they believed, and it says so right in the Bhagavad Gita, that Om is a philosophical sound that centers you and calms you and reconnects you to a cosmic mother. So I started chanting drone as I would Om, and it affected me in the exact same way. I then wanted to take this out onto the streets, and Machine Project Gallery is at a very busy street corner. It's at Alvarado and Sunset Boulevard. So I love street corners. I absolutely love traffic lights. It's the perfect opportunity to grab unsuspecting people and write poems with them and do experiments with them. So the hook for this was, could you please join me in calling drones what they really are, flying killer robots? And most people were like, get lost, get away from me. They were afraid of me. They thought I was crazy. And some people said, well, that's interesting. And then I got some of those people to chant drone with me on this very busy street corner. And it's amazing how it works on that busy street corner, chanting drone. But then I wanted to change this a little more. So there's a U.S. military and Israeli military mission from about 5, 6, 7 years ago at this point called Pillar of Cloud. I don't know if you're familiar with Pillar of Cloud in the Old Testament. I was raised in the Pentecost Baptists, and it means where God shows the Israelites how to find him. I think that's very odd to name your military mission after that. But nonetheless, they did this. They were bombing Gaza for 3 days and 3 nights with drones. What I did was I went to Echo Park, which is 3 blocks away from Mission Project, and I made this target on my hand with red ink. And I'm right-handed, so I wanted to use my left side, my absorbent side, where things come in through me. And I sat by this very strange man-made lake in Echo Park, and every time, and I downloaded this military mission, the sounds of it. And every time I could hear the missile leave the undercarriage of the drone and explode the target, you can hear screams. I would have to scream into my palm target while writing. And of course, as you can imagine, the notes from the first part of the ritual, where I'm chanting drone with strangers on the street corner, is very calm and peaceful, just how we're expected to accept the word drone. Very calm and peaceful. But then I wanted to hear what drones are really doing. This is that piece that I just mentioned will be in my new book that's coming out this fall. It's called While Standing in Line for Death. I want to talk about this because the opening ritual to this book is my favorite. So I started doing these rituals for a new way of writing poetry for me, creating an extreme present. However, I believed that I could do more than that. I believe that art, poetry, and the rituals we do with those can affect us in ways that we've only begun to understand. The magic of these things. I had a boyfriend named Earth. He changed his name to Earth. This is a picture of him. He was an AIDS activist and an environmental activist, and he was burned out. We had lost a lot of friends. I went to 54 funerals in 1991 of friends who died of AIDS. He went to far more than that. And he just needed a break. So he went to Tennessee, to this all-queer spiritual community to work the gardens. And he was loving this new choice in his life. And I was on the phone with him. He told me about a cave that he had discovered on the side of the mountain where he was meditating in the morning before working in the garden. And I said, that's beautiful. And then we made plans for me to come down and visit, and we were going to spend the night in the cave, etc. He told me to say hello to everybody in Philadelphia. And then 3 days later, he's dead. The police wrote his death up as a suicide. I knew that couldn't be true. He has an identical twin brother. Their names were Mark and Matthew. My boyfriend was Mark, and his identical twin brother is Matthew. The documentary that Matthew and Ludovica mentioned, the Book of Conrad, that screened somewhere around here, they interview his brothers, his older brother and his identical twin brother, about the murder. Matthew comes into the store where I'm working, and I had just found out that Earth was dead. I couldn't even believe it. And he showed me the death certificate, and the coroner wrote on the death certificate the word homicide. I started looking into this immediately and found out that his ankles and wrists were bound together. He was gagged, he was tortured, he was raped, he was covered in gasoline and burned to death. I started immediately trying to get the sheriff of the police department to tell me why he was not investigating this. It's clear that they are born-again Christians. They're not interested. They hate homosexuals. He started calling me faggot like it was my name over the phone. He threatened that if I went back down there again, that he was going to arrest me. I almost got arrested when I was down there the last time. I had to race out of there. But I just got on the highway because these people don't leave too far from home. And when I still wouldn't stop, he sent the Philadelphia Police Department to my apartment where I was living at the time. 6 of them came, and they handcuffed me in the hallway, and they smashed my face into the hall and screamed at me and laughed at me, and basically told me to leave the sheriff alone, to mind my own business. There was no way to get the FBI to even begin to investigate this. Now with this new documentary, my hope is that it's available in 4 countries right now, and as the word spreads, I'm hoping that it will make the police finally do their job. But what I want to talk about is the ritual. I wanted to do a ritual to cure myself of the depression. I was already depressed from his murder. We'd already survived a lot of death together, but his death completely destroyed me. From 1988 to 1998, I was macrobiotic. I was very athletic. And after his murder, I just got derailed. And I didn't eat meat again, but I started eating junk food and stopped exercising. And I just hated my life at this point. It was very difficult to even continue living, frankly. And I knew that there was a way that I could cure this depression with the poetry. These 2 books that I read from, each of them have rituals that I tried. I did 2 rituals that they failed in the sense that I didn't feel any better. In fact, sometimes I would feel worse. But I did like the poems enough to publish them. The 3rd ritual, the one that's going to be in this book, worked. I received a fellowship from the MacDowell Arts Colony in New Hampshire, and that's where I wanted to go. I realized that the first 2 rituals just weren't difficult enough. I needed to go darker. I needed to go to the darkest possible place to cure this. And what I did was, I took the crystal that the last time I saw him alive, he gave me a crystal that was about 1.5 inches long, clear quartz crystal that he had been carrying around with him for over a year, maybe 1.5 years. What we know from quartz crystal technology, like piezoelectricity, the uses in industry and computers, clocks, watches, we know the capabilities of how this current works. We also know that crystals, especially clear quartz crystals, hold information. They're libraries. So this, to me, was a library of my boyfriend, his breath, his footfalls, his life. So what I did was I took that with me to MacDowell, and I put it under my hair wrap, and then every morning I would take a smaller round clear quartz crystal and swallow it. That one was the worker crystal. It would go inside of me, and it would pull the information out of his crystal into my blood and bones and tissue. Within a week, I was transformed. There was a movie that had been playing in my head, just this fiction of the police finally do their job and they catch the killers and there's a courtroom drama, but the film disappears and my anger starts to disappear. I then would sleep with the crystal under my pillow and only did that 9 times because the dreams were absolutely horrific. And each one of these 9 dreams, I'm killing his killers. I'm decapitating them, I'm choking them, I'm stabbing them, I'm shooting them, and I'm not a violent person. So it horrified me that I was doing this in the dreams, but it just was so frustrating to have the police come after me. All I wanted them to do was change the report, at least, that it wasn't of suicide. So I'm going to read a handful of those poems to you. A spider's web is made of digested fly brains, wings, hairs, legs, tears, pheromones, attracting more flies, dissolving us into the endeavor of love. Hold me to your song, it is delicious. Hear you one more time in middle of night, tooth it open. Love all unloved parts without pause. Dear ghost, flickering without flames that no longer hurt. deflated lungs expanding. You say they can only burn a faggot once. When you died the way you died, it was contaminating. A new danger of being lost and insecure. But reality can never be avoided forever. At the same moment, who is afraid of whom? The killers or my beloved, or guilt of my continued song? Desire is not what we achieve, it's a knife often carving the wrong way, or racking it in the alchemy of a mood. I should never trade youth for poetry's resonance of aging, but I can put every poem I ever wrote in a pile and burn them if you would appear on the other side. Your rapists were the last to taste you in this world. Their breath and terror down your neck keeps me up at night. But which page of the Bible says to burn the faggot after you force him to give you your pleasure? Each time I drink water dropped from clouds, water they burned out of your body, I cut my hands to catch you. In the revenge dream I behead one of them, spell your name on my face with his blood. The other is begging as I choke him, his neck as soft as your neck. I pull him off his knees, check for tattoos. Is it him? Is it you? I miss you. I love you. Poetry or another shovel working where the real America buried you. The kind of men shown a table with blueprints of our city to destroy us. When they punish us, it is exactly how we knew it would feel. Places with the least warmth exchanged with places we miss one another in. Sunlight snorkel of corn silk as the hummingbird drinks your wounds away. Fuck the real America up the ass with the fake one. Let it all be done, you said. Let it all be done, I said. The spirit of your flowers is my favorite shelter. We were in love is the main thing. Faintest green light and tree pulls me forward. Whenever life is beautiful makes me think of you, carry color of the forest to be with you, to belong to this world with you, to have what we have, and that is it. Yes, the present is between the past and future, but it's too radical to be called the middle. Dear Earth, it is okay to not roll the stone back uphill. We rent memory storage in the world you left behind. Little wonder in this dell of broken treaties. Daisies bend under our slightest breath. You did not answer after you died. It is when I learned to be lonely everywhere. Between dreaming and crying until it calcified and fell off. I want to talk to you a little bit now about one of the new rituals I'm doing. So I was born January 1st, 1966. And it's important for me to say that because before I say that, ecopoetics. Before I get into that, ecopoetics is a form of poetry and the discourse around a type of poetry that is involving the environment, ecosystems which are being destroyed. I believe that ecopoetics doesn't just have to be a focus on degraded soil, air, and water, but also vibrational absence. Meaning, the World Wildlife Fund did a study looking at especially the vertebrate animals on planet Earth from between the years 1970 and 2010. They discovered that more than half of the animals in that 4 decades have vanished from the planet. It's only increasing. We're actually, by 2017, at about 60% of all the wild animals. Alex Renton from the Guardian newspaper in London coincidentally published an article that was so popular that then reprinted it into a small pamphlet booklet that looks like this with like a staple. And it's called, I think I might be misquoting the title, but it's something like The High Cost of Cheap Meat, something like that. He was doing a study on the flesh farmed animals alone. He discovered that on the planet right now, there are 60 billion farmed flesh animals, just for their flesh. That doesn't include the animals for their eggs, their fur, their wool, the zoos, the pets. He claims that in the past few years, maybe 5 years, we've crossed this line where there are now more incarcerated animals than wild ones. So I'm thinking about what this vibrational absence is doing. I want to go back to the manifesto a second. I have a paragraph in the manifesto that was so the subtitle to this other book I read from is called Somatics for the Future Wilderness. So I want to just read this tiny bit in here for you. The last large wild beasts are being hunted, poisoned, asphyxiated in one way or another. And the transmission of their wildness is dying, taming. A desert is rising with this falling pulse. It is our duty as poets and others who have not lost our jagged creative edges to fill that gap and resist the urge to subdue our spirits and lose ourselves in the hypnotic beep of machines, of war, and the banal need for power and things. With our poems and creative core, we must return this world to its seismic levels of wildness. That is the end of that quote is on this blanket. I'm telling you now what I'm doing. So I'm looking at the fact that I was born in 1966. When my cells were being formed as an infant, they were being formed on a very rich organic vibration on the planet that was more than twice of that wild organic vibration than it is now. Children being born in 2017 are being born on a more human sound because we're not just destroying these sounds or these animals, we're also replacing them with our sounds. Metallic sounds. Wars, cars, everything, industry. In my lifetime, so when I was a child, there were about 2.5 billion people. We're closing in on 8, which is crazy. When Emily Dickinson was alive, the wild bison still roamed the western United States, and there were only 1 billion people on the planet. What I'm doing is I've been taking a lot of these animal sounds. They're all on the internet. The scientists have been collecting and studying these animals for years. They didn't know they were building a tomb, but of course they have created a tomb. These creature sounds only exist on the internet now. Their heartbeats, their footfalls, their cries, their wing flutters, their hoof prints being made. And what I do is I take these sounds and this is on the other side of the Golden Gate Bridge. This is one of the days I was doing this. I drive across the United States quite a bit, teaching, and I prefer driving than flying if I can help it because it uses far less oil and gas than a plane does. And what I do is I put my blanket on the floor wherever I am. For instance, I most recently, after the election, that horrible election, I drove from San Francisco to New York City to do things. It's about 9 days to do that trip, 7 hours driving every day for 9 days. So wherever I would stop, I would put the blanket down, and then I would have the speakers down by my feet first, playing these sounds of these creatures, and then move the speakers up my body. What I've discovered is, because I do not like being depressed, obviously I just told you about a ritual I did to overcome depression. Why would I want to be depressed again? It's horrible to be depressed. And I don't recommend it if you can avoid it. But the opposite is happening. Instead of becoming depressed, it's very strange. I feel like my cells are drinking these sounds in, like old friends, and I'm elated. I feel guilty about it, actually. I look forward to doing this. This spring, however, I will only do this from now on where there's human traffic. I've been speaking to a lawyer about what happens when I'm out there in the middle of Minnesota and I'm arrested, because that will eventually happen to me. Every time I've tried it so far, at the Michigan Welcome Center, I was picked up and thrown out the door. I did it in a Walmart. That's all the other parts. So let me just show you this bird. This is one of my favorite bird songs. This is the dusky seaside sparrow, who became completely extinct in 1988 off the coast of Florida from overdevelopment. Experts are claiming right now that we might be losing as much as 110 species of plants, insects, and vertebrate animals every single day from deforestation. This little bird was just adorable. I love the sounds that it made. Part of the ritual, I don't know if you're familiar with this mega retailer, Walmart. There are 9,000 of these stores in the lower 48 states. Walmart is one of the most despicable, horrendous, this is a nightmare that can't continue. The small ones have 250,000 items on the shelves. The large ones have 500,000. Sam Walton, the genius who started this nightmare, saw the coming baby boom generation, the hippie generation, retiring and getting their Winnebagas and pretending they're Ken Kesey or Jack Kerouac and driving across America. And he said, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll let them park for free in all my Walmarts, and then they can get up in the morning and buy bagels or whatever, so they get to shop. And but what he didn't count on was that he and others were destroying the working classes in the United States. I mean, just destroying everybody. And there are homeless families. What I do is I sleep in Walmart parking lots in my car. It's part of the ritual. And then I speak to these people living in their people just living in their cars, families with children. Sometimes on the windshield there'll be a sign that says, we need baby formula, we need diapers. There's this man I've seen several times who says, I need cigarettes, I need beer. He's very interesting. I get up in the morning and then I go into the Walmart and I listen to the sound recordings of the animals, and I walk around the perimeter and to a spiral into the middle of the store, and then I kneel down and take my notes for the poem. So I did try to lie down inside of a Walmart and was physically thrown out. Didn't take very long. I wasn't being a jerk about it. I didn't do it where it was very busy. I did it where the section where greeting cards meant shampoo. It was very low traffic. But I felt these people lifting me up. I was trying to explain what I was doing. They said, shut up, we don't care what you're doing. And they threw me out in my blanket. So I'm now trying to do this in public spaces. I did it in Wyoming. I don't know if you're familiar with Wyoming. I love Wyoming for some reasons. I did a ritual there. I've done so many rituals. They're in these books. One of my favorites was in Wyoming, because Wyoming is the least inhabited state in the United States, so there's no light pollution. And I wanted to study create star constellations of my own. And I would be up all night long with these star constellations and then writing about them. But the people there are extremely not conservative. They're practically Nazis. And so I was at their they take 4th of July very seriously. They're very patriotic. So they shut off in Laramie, Wyoming, where Matthew Shepard was murdered for being gay. They had all these blocks shut off, and then a barbecue, and all these children singing God Bless America, and the old people crying because God Bless America is so overwhelming, I suppose. And I was on my blanket, and I had little pamphlets with a rock saying, this is what I'm doing if you want to know, and then they pick them up and they read them. But at the end, this man came up to me, and he got right in my face, and he said, you know what I do every morning when I get up? And I said, I have a feeling you're going to tell me. His spit's going in my face. He's so close. He says, I go out to the ranch and I shoot a coyote because I can. And then he walked away. I'm assuming that meant that if he could shoot me, he would. So he goes and shoots a coyote every day. Well, he needs a medal, I suppose. So that's what I'm doing right now. Are there any questions? Thank you again for coming. Thank you again for having me. I'll answer any questions.
I wanted to ask you, when you were young, you said that when you were selling flowers, you would read. But
Yeah.
was there someone that introduced you to books, or was there a teacher, or did you have a good library to go to in your town?
Well, reading was the only thing to really do. I mean, it just seemed like there were no cell phones or nothing existed in 1974 that you could do. So reading was what I did, and everybody where I grew up was functionally illiterate. Nobody owned bookshelves. There were no books in any houses where I grew up. Family, friends, neighbors, nobody. And so it was very lonely as it was doing this job. And then it was just I was fine with that though. But when I turned 16, I was reading an article about child labor laws. And I showed that to my mother, and I said, "You owe me 8 years of Social Security benefits and all these things." And she almost threw me out of the house. Reading changed my life, and poetry completely gave me a whole new way of being on the planet.
Is there a difference between exercise and rituals?
I call them rituals because, let me back up here. Why can't I get this to go back? Okay, good. Here we go. So the word somatic, I see how I isolate soma inside of the word with brackets. So soma appears in the first book ever written, the Rig Vedas in India. The Vedic scriptures talk about soma. Soma originally meant to press and be newly born, meaning that people were taking energizing plants like wheatgrass and psychedelic plants like maybe salvia. Not that they were using these, but these are examples. Crushing them together and getting the juice and then drinking the juice. When the British arrived, for instance, in the OED, the Oxford English Dictionary, I consider incorrectly, say that this is an Indo-Persian word because it was also being used in ancient Persia. What they don't understand was, I think that was just the empire, just incapable of discussing the fact that when people in England were still living in huts, India was a thriving civilization, already having trade routes with ancient Persia. So the Sufis started using soma. Soma also was a twig that they would use to boil and drink the tea. But I like thinking about soma as a noun and a verb. It's the seeking of the soul. And the thing is, the word soma lives inside the Greek word for the flesh, the body's cavity, the nervous system's somatic. So I really love the fact that inside the word for the flesh is the word for the soul, the seeking of the soul, the conversation with the soul. So I'm trying to think about poetry in a way, I don't want to think of it as just procedural. I don't want to think of it as merely an exercise, but as, for instance, the transcendentalist Henry David Thoreau has a marvelous essay called On Walking. And he takes the word saunter, and he looks at its origin. It's from France, and it's from what I understand, the very first travel guide ever printed was in the 12th century in France for pilgrims who were on their way to see the relics of the saints. So the children would follow after these people on the road to see the saints' relics, santer, and then it becomes saunter, like we're sauntering, we're walking. Thoreau believed that saunter was the true form of walking because it involved that exciting mission for holiness. And he believed that all the ground you should walk on should be considered holy. And if you're not walking in that way, you're merely a vagrant. So I like that idea. I'm not the biggest fan of the transcendentalists, but I do like that. I especially don't like Walt Whitman. But the thing is, I really do Love that idea. So when I'm out there working with, and triangulate experiences with this idea of the spirit, the physical body, and then the ritual that I'm doing. So I'm trying to think about it as the ingredients of a ritual to change. For instance, here's how it's changed me. I was in Marfa, Texas, as I said, and I come out of the post office, and there's this car pulling up with a radio blaring, playing a song from my childhood in the 70s called Band of Gold. It's a pop song. And I'm listening to the song, and I'm thinking, what are those instruments, and what are those really the lyrics? That's a really terrible song. And then I just left after the song was finished. It wasn't until later that evening that I realized how significant that was, because if I had heard that song a decade and a half ago before I started doing these rituals, I would have been dragged back into time, nostalgic, thinking about my childhood. But I wasn't doing that. I was very present. The thing about doing these rituals is that it creates this place of extreme presence in your life all the time, every day. That's why I really want to honor it by calling them rituals instead of exercises. Sorry, that's a very long answer, but... Are there any other questions?
How do you come up with the rituals? Do you have like a ritual to come up with it?
I like that. Maybe I should come up with a ritual. Well, the thing is, I'm very good at it. It just comes. I'm actually now, like I just finished teaching before coming to Europe. I was in Berlin first at the KW Museum doing workshops, and then Vilnius and Bergen, and now I'm here. And I was teaching at Columbia in New York City, and I had students who were, I was there for 6 weeks teaching every week, and I wanted to do something special. When I have a group of people for that long, what I like to do is take all the members of the workshop, and we divide them up so that each day we meet, the whole workshop develops personalized rituals just for that student. But I like us all working together. That's very important, because my job is not to show you in the workshop how great I am. It's to show you how great you are, because everybody on the planet is creative. We have 30,000 years of human civilization where artifacts were they're in every museum around the world. And that 30,000 year period, that first 30,000 years, there's not a single name of an artist on any of this work anywhere. Because they assumed everybody is creative, everybody is an artist. It's just when men got involved in the story about 5,000 years, it all went the wrong direction. And there's part of me that thinks that a lot of us are trying to get back to that now. And the best thing to do is to encourage everybody to see how they are creative. That's the most important thing. And what we do is we create these rituals, and I want to go right at the thing that's hard. I don't think we should be diddling around with these easy things. And especially if your life is being destroyed. I had a student I teach every summer at the Jack Kerouac Writing School in Naropa University in Boulder. And I had a student about 5 years ago, this brilliant student named Elizabeth Sawecki. She's allowed me to use her name. And about 5 months later, she graduated that summer, and then 5 months later went back to Boulder for a performance at another college. And she came, and I thanked her for coming, and then I asked her how her writing has been since the workshop, and she said, I can't write. I haven't been able to write at all. I can't write. And she burst into tears when I said, that's ridiculous. We did all this work, and now you're not writing already. I already told you, I told every class, I said, 98% of everybody I meet who graduates from these programs stops doing their artwork, stops writing, to never do it again. Almost everybody. And my job is to show you how to always do it. I use a lot of diagrams from CAT scans and MRIs from the human brain and the evidence we have of a practice makes perfect, and whatever that is in your brain for writing poems, you can get lost. What happened was, so I decided to write a ritual with her after my presentation. We went to this little place called Innisfree, and I said, tell me what's happened to you. How is this possible? You're so brilliant. And what she did was to pay her insanely huge student loans She took a job in a medical office doing billing. And this job calls for an inordinate amount of memorization of code, numbers mixed with letters. So it made sense to me because she was unable to find her way back now because she was consumed with this part of her brain that she'd never used before. And she couldn't find her way back. So I said, listen, Elizabeth, it's so easy. That's the thing, it's much easier than you believe. I said, here's what I want you to do. We call the ritual the stupid, evil job that's ruining my life. And I asked her to have a Word document open and then minimize it and do your stupid job. And then every 20 minutes, 3 times an hour, you open that document up, have your feet flat, position your fingers on the keys, close your eyes, and type as fast as you can for 5 minutes. As soon as your mind starts going down a hole with a thread, a narrative, right, type faster. The real magic is getting on the other side of that editor, all the thinking. She's already thinking too much with all these numbers. That was the problem. And so what she does is she just keeps typing and typing, and then she prints this huge document out at the end of the week and carries it around with a highlighter pen, and she's finding all these poems now that she then calls together and copies and pastes into another document and shapes them into poems. There's always a solution for this. There's always a way back. But I have a list. I don't know if I'll live long enough to do all of them. Plus, I have rituals to do, for instance, if I'm diagnosed with cancer, how to write when you're dying of cancer or on chemotherapy, when the radiation is making your hair fall out. What do you do when you're sick and writing? And then there's a whole list of rituals that I can't do. I will not be allowed to do. Like, I'm obsessed with the International Space Station's webcams. I love it. You see these Russian astronauts carry a potted plant through a door, and that's all you see, but you want to know more, right? At least I do. And but they're not going to let me up there to write poems, but I do write to them, and eventually somebody will write back, I'm convinced. I will wear them down. I'm a Capricorn. So, but yeah, that's my answer. I don't know. I just have a knack for it. I could do another talk which is about occult poetics and how I believe that this is all, we're being spoken to by ghosts in our ear all the time, I believe that, to many. But it's amazing how easy it is to get people to reconnect with their creative powers. It doesn't take it that much effort, actually. That's the exciting news. Are there any other questions? If anybody is interested, I have free poems up here, and then there are books up here. But I'm not trying to get rid of you. I'm just saying that's up here if you want it. And if you have any other questions, I'd be more than happy to take them. Are there any poets in the room? That happens to me a lot. None. Yes.
You mentioned that you are a lot abroad. However, do you have a daily ritual?
Oh yeah, many.
Makes you kind of feel at home to all this place, or that you?
No, I don't care about home. Yeah. No, I don't care about. I feel at home wherever I am. I'm at home in Zurich right now. I love it. And then I'll be in London tomorrow, and I'll be at home in London. And then I'll be in Glasgow and Edinburgh. I'm excited. I love the world. It's worth fighting for, right? I don't want to, I come from people who never leave where they grew up. I have relatives who have never left the town where I grew up. Seriously. And they are as narrow-minded as that sounds. Completely racist and homophobic and misogynist. Just crazy, xenophobic. And, no, I do have daily rituals, though. So since 2000, I had my hair up, but so since the 3rd anniversary of the invasion of Baghdad, I stopped cutting my hair. So it's very long. And then every morning when I get up, I look at the latest body count. It's grown. Like when President Obama took office, we were in 2 wars, and he and his Secretary of State Hillary Clinton added 5. So we're in 7 wars now. And with Trump, it's only going to get worse. Because everything's going in the wrong direction, that's why. And But the body count is just excruciating. And the sad thing is, the pathetic thing is, the infuriating thing is, that no matter where I am in the United States doing this ritual when I wake up, I can't find anybody who's talking about the fact that we're a country at war. There were 3 different reporters from major news outlets in the United States after Donald Trump won, who literally said separately, well, now that Donald Trump has taken over in a time of peace, let's see if he can keep the peace. And I would send them emails saying, are you smoking crack? We're at war. We're not at peace. Have you not been seeing the body count? How can you possibly say we're not at war? It's maddening. So what I do is with this ritual is I look at the latest body count, and then I measure from the longest strands, like the inches of the war dead by inches of hair, all the way up. And then I write. So that's one that I do every day. Some of these take a long time, like the ritual with the extinct animals is still ongoing. Then there's some that just take an afternoon, like the escalator piece I read, that was an afternoon. There's so many of them. I just did one where the new book has, this thing always gets stuck for some reason, there we go. The new book has a series of rituals I call power sissy intervention. A lot of people are unaware of this, but in the past 2 years, in the United States, there have been, and you can look it up if you don't believe me, because a lot of people think, is he making this up? And then they look it up and they're like, you're right. I'm like, I know that. There are over 200 anti-lesbian, gay, transgender laws being issued right now. And they're sticking. In Tennessee, there's a law that if a doctor is a born-again Christian, keep in mind, the American population, 1 in 4 Americans, U.S. Americans, is a born-again Christian, right-wing evangelist. They're very serious people. I don't know what. They're pro-life as long. They're pro-selective lives. They want to save all the unborn babies, but they want to go kill the babies in Afghanistan. They're fine with that. It's very strange. I don't know how to even talk to people like that. But there are all these laws. In the state of Tennessee, there is a law right now that doctors can ignore and waive the Hippocratic Oath if they're born-again Christian and not wait on you. Leave you to die in the parking lot of the emergency room. There is a law in Mississippi that gay and lesbian transgender people are forbidden to adopt children now. In the state of North Carolina, where I currently live, we are not allowed to enter a bathroom except for the one assigned to us by our gender on our birth certificates. In the state of Indiana and Arizona, there are laws against gay and lesbian transgender people right now that shop owners and restaurant owners can throw us out. The owner of a very large chain of restaurants called Cracker Barrel, appropriately titled, in the southern United States, is the owner fired all the gay and lesbian employees one day because it's legal to do that now. And there's a small documentary about how all these workers were on the parking lot protesting that they lost their jobs for being gay and lesbian. And these men in monster trucks and baseball bats show up and just beat the shit out of them on camera. Like, the violence is absolutely unbelievable right now. And it really is just getting worse. I'll have to be honest. When I woke up and saw the news the morning that the HB2 law had been passed in North Carolina, I just thought that was the stupidest thing. Because I've been through a lot. I've been on the streets being beaten up by police, and, I've been through all this. And this to me just seemed crazy. So I went to the protest. All the other protesters I am 51. All the other protesters were like 19, 20, 21, and they were in such pain. I heard one suicide attempt story after the other. I mean, this is really destroying people's lives. And it has been for years now. And so it just made me angry. So I have a series of them coming out in the new book. One of them where I take bubbles, children's bubbles that you blow, to a very busy part of Asheville. And I sat on a chair so that I was sort of like eye level with the children, and then I would have to look up at their adults. So I'm blowing the bubbles, and of course the children come around and they're like, oh, bubbles. And then I look up at their parents and I say, these are queer bubbles. They're going to turn your children queer, radical, anti-racist, they're going to be against misogyny and racism, and the parents are like, oh my God, we got to go. They're just like grabbing the kids and leaving. Now, a few of the parents were like, that's cool, I'll love my kids no matter what. Those were the parents I was looking for. The thing is, the city that I moved to, Asheville, North Carolina, it purports to be this super liberal, crunchy granola city, but just peel that veil a bit, and you'll see what's really going on. So I've been doing a bunch of them. I just did one with, so in the city of Philadelphia, where I've had the most violence against me from the police, I did a ritual in January that kind of scared the shit out of me, I have to be honest, where the goal was, and I did it, I had to approach 9 police officers and go up to them and say, I want to talk to you about the violence that your fellow officers have done to me and my friends. And some of them are like, get lost, get out of here. Or you cigars, their term is cigar smoker, it means you're a faggot, you're a cocksucker, And, but then there were others who would listen and they would say, I'm very sorry to hear that. Not one of those 9, by the way, told me about the grievance policy at City Hall for what you have to do when a police officer brutalizes you. That's what I was looking for. But it was a little scary, that one, I have to be honest with you. One other one I did, I rather enjoyed this one, I guess. Coming from a family filled with born-again Christians who hate homosexuals, who would read the book of Romans to me, recite it rather. They don't need to read it, they have it memorized. And so I took, this is the letter, especially the letters that Apostle Paul wrote to the Romans. That's where the language in the New Testament is that we should be exterminated. That's where the language appears that homosexuality is a sin and should be done away with. We should be done away with. So what I did was I took those 9 pages and I would take 9 days. So I would read a page, sing the page, scream the page, and then I would pulverize it in a blender, put it in a suppository, and then stick it up my ass, and then go out onto the streets ringing a bell and screaming the names of the dead. All my friends who died of AIDS, the victims of the Orlando gay club shooting, you name it. My boyfriend who was murdered, my boyfriend who died of AIDS. I just would do this, and then I would read some of these new laws against us. And then I would write my poem. So that's another one I did. Yeah. Is there anything else?
Outside the brackets on the Semitic poetry rituals is the word tick.
Yeah.
And when you have a daily ritual, when is it a tick?
I like that question. It's funny because sometimes when people are introducing me at events, they're not sure how to pronounce this. They think it's somatic. And I like that, and I don't correct anybody because it's none of my business what you think it is. And but yeah, the tick. That's right. I love that. Right? It's a tick. It's also the only part of the word, and also a tick sucks your blood out, right? Yeah.
Cool. If there are no more questions, thank you very much for sharing.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure being here.